What secret did you once know that has since become public knowledge? Story 1. I'm a patent attorney, so I see a lot of inventions, most of which people would probably find extremely dull. Nearly all of them eventually get published anyway. As someone who holds about 20 patents myself and sits on my company's patent committee, where we decide whether a patent is even worth filing, I can say that most patents are boring because they're usually incremental instead of groundbreaking, not quantum teleportation. But let's slightly adjust this bike pedal so it works for very small or very large people. Often not even truly novel. Sometimes there's barely any prior art. Patent holders get away with this because defending against infringement is so expensive that it's cheaper to settle. And patent examiners are overloaded for a variety of reasons. Story 2. My first-year astronomy professor told our class that gravitational waves had almost certainly been detected about a week before the official announcement. I was working at CERN when the Higgs boson discovery was announced. The ATLAS and CMS results were supposed to stay internal until the press conference, but in the days leading up to it, there was a noticeable energy in the air. People were casually planning barbecues and buying champagne. Totally coincidental, of course. Story 3. This one isn't very exciting, but back in middle school, my best friend's mom worked for some kind of vending machine company and got to try Snickers peanut butter before it was released publicly. So basically, I got to eat a pretty decent candy bar a few weeks before everyone else. I once read a murder mystery where a guy kills his annoying stepdaughter and leaves her body in a remote area with the wrapper of a candy bar that hasn't been released yet. He works for the candy company's ad agency. His plan is that when the body is found, he'll have an airtight alibi since the candy isn't even on the market yet. But then the company considers canceling the candy because testers say it's pretty disgusting, so the murderer goes back to retrieve the wrapper. While doing so, a rock falls on his head and kills him. Ironic ending, the company releases the candy anyway, and it flops because it's pretty disgusting. Story 4. Back in 2012, I knew Wells Fargo was opening unauthorized accounts. One banker opened 9 business checking and savings accounts in my name without permission. I became suspicious when I received 9 debit cards in the mail over the next few weeks and panicked, thinking my identity had been stolen. I went to 3 different Wells Fargo branches before someone finally admitted they suspected the banker was just trying to meet her monthly quota for a bonus. I lost it and demanded all the accounts be closed immediately. My husband is still convinced I was one of the earliest whistleblowers. Story 5. I do consulting work for a major car manufacturer. I've known about new models and seen official images weeks before anything is announced. Meanwhile, people on Jalopnik or RC cars are squinting at blurry camo spy shots and guessing specs while I've already seen the full resolution photos and data. As a car enthusiast, it's pretty fun knowing before everyone else. Similarly, I now work for a company that prints massive quantities of movie posters and gaming materials for major productions. That means I see first-run movie posters months before release, as well as gaming materials before events like E3. Interestingly, gaming companies are insanely strict. They'll rope off entire sections of the print floor and make us sign massive NDAs. Movie studios are much more relaxed. It's cool knowing what big announcements are coming before they happen. Story 6. This wasn't really a secret, so much as it hadn't reached the US yet. My grandma brought back toys from China for my brother and me, Beyblade. These were the real deal compared to the American versions, probably due to looser safety rules. Thicker plastic, heavy metal cores, and they were literally designed to spark when they hit each other. We didn't even know what they were and shoved them under our beds until the anime got popular. Once American versions came out, the Chinese ones absolutely shredded them. One even made my brother bleed. Story 7. My dad worked for Acura when the first Avengers movie was released. Acura heavily funded the film, which is why so many cars in it are Acuras. As part of the promotion, employees at certain dealerships got to see it a day early with their families. The security was intense. A woman scanned everyone with a metal detector before entry. All electronics had to be left outside, and 2 guys with night vision goggles stood at the front watching the audience the entire time. Story 8. I worked at a TV station that was a WB secondary affiliate. Our rural market couldn't support a separate transmitter, so we recorded shows off the satellite feed and aired them later that week. That meant I was the first person in the state to know if Dawson broke up with Joey or if Pacey got a nosebleed. The annoying part was that the network constantly aired promos for shows we either skipped or had already aired, disrupting the broadcast flow. I had to cover them with our own local promos. Of course, fans on listservs would still get spoiled by people elsewhere. My secret only lasted within a 4-vowel word: mile dead zone. Some studios also fed first-run shows to Canada via encrypted satellite before US airings, usually at 6 a.m. on Saturdays when they assumed no one would notice. Oh, and I heard about George W. Bush's DUI before it broke on air. Story 9. I was an intelligence analyst in the 1990s. After the Berlin Wall fell and the USSR became Russia with glasnost and perestroika, everyone started celebrating the end of the Cold War, even the military. Everyone except intelligence analysts. We all knew it wasn't over. We expected Russia to retreat, regroup, and come back in a different way. We warned people. Nobody important cared. Same thing with 9/11s. Not the exact attack, but the inevitability of something like it. Saddam was awful, but he tightly controlled Iraq's borders. Once the government collapsed, the region became a playground for extremists. Destroying countries, killing civilians, and occupying indefinitely tends to radicalize people. Most of today's geopolitical disasters were completely foreseeable and foreseen. Decision makers were warned and ignored it. Story 10. This is from my late uncle. GPS becoming what it is today. He was on the Air Force team that originally developed it for missile guidance. Because of what he knew, his phone was tapped and black SUVs would occasionally park outside his house or follow him. I remember the clicking noise on the phone line. My brother once said the SUV was probably just a neighbor. My uncle said, "Watch this." Picked up the phone, said satellite, 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 hung up, then went for a drive. The SUV followed every bizarre turn and lane change for over half an hour. He used to mess with them regularly. He hated being monitored. He never told us everything, even after GPS went public, because he'd been warned he'd disappear into a cell forever if he did. This was long before smartphones. Story 11. I've got a friend who used to be a very famous Olympian's personal chef. He traveled everywhere the guy went and became great friends. Apparently the Olympian was horribly depressed and the Olympic Commission actually paid my friend to hang out with him so he wouldn't end himself. He also has dozens of stories of the Olympian cheating on his now wife, including one where the guy asked my friend to hide a hooker because his girlfriend, now wife, was coming to visit in 5 minutes. I used to look up to this athlete and he's super popular, but I can't think of him the same way anymore. And I don't want to tell his name because he's incredibly famous and none of this has ever been revealed in the news. Story 12. When I was a fairly junior computer technician in my early 20s, I was doing some work for a small city in Texas. It was so small that the city hall only had like 6 or 7 employees, not including the mayor. All of their computers were used for accounting purposes like mailing water bills and keeping track of specific budgets for public works. Pretty standard stuff. During the process of troubleshooting an issue with their accounting software, I was fairly sure that the guy who ran the city hall office had been embezzling money from the city. I told the mayor, but she didn't really seem interested. Being so young, I didn't really know what to do and wasn't confident enough in the discovery to push it any further. I politely dropped them as clients to put distance between myself and their impending crap storm. Several years later, I saw him being arrested on TV for theft of public funds and the mayor was also under investigation. It caused something of a crisis in the little town. I regret not going to the FBI or something, Ray. Story 13. My dad used to work for General Mills, and when I was a young kid, like maybe 6 years old, my dad volunteered us, me and my siblings, to taste test different versions of French Toast Crunch before it was launched. I remember my dad telling me to not tell anyone about it because the product wasn't official yet. Me and my siblings had to eat one version of the cereal for several days before trying the next one. I think there were 3 versions altogether if I remember correctly. And after all were tried, we had to write our thoughts on each one and which we liked the best. Honestly, I was so young that I had no idea what to write or even how to articulate myself on the subtleties and flavors, and honestly, they all tasted the same to me, so I just made stuff up and called it a day. Story 14. I knew about the 130,000-year-old mastodon insight and the importance of it rewriting our understanding of hominids here on this continent, years before it was made public, but maintained quasi-secrecy until the info was published. Human beings only really evolved as we know them in the last 50,000 years or so, and really solidified in the last ice age. But anatomically modern humans had been around between 200 to 300,000 of years ago. The move out of Africa, and somehow making it all the way over to what is now known as the area around San Diego, California, is nothing more than mind-boggling, and this pushes the timeline back further than anything previously imagined. So this was perhaps some other hominid species other than humans that went and killed or scavenged a mastodon, butchered the carcass with tools, and arranged the bones in a specific way to mark the site. We don't know, we just know it was something that used crude tools like later known human insights did. It's one of those things that when sitting around with friends always brings up the explanation of some far-fetched alien or time traveler crashing and being trapped in the past as a what if. Story 15. I had an interview at a land surveying company a while back just after Disney bought the Star Wars franchise. I was talking to the interviewer and asking him various questions and just having an all-around general talk. He mentioned he was in the middle of doing an extremely large project at Disney, but that's all he could say. It comes to be revealed a little while later that Disney is opening a Star Wars section for their parks. I guess I wasn't directly told that Disney was going to be revealing a Star Wars section, but I was basically told, yeah, something big is coming soon. Story 16. Really late but Jack Link's beef jerky. HQ essentially is like a half an hour to an hour drive from where I live. No one in my family worked there but had friends' family work there. Anyways, I don't fully remember, but quite a few years ago, I was at a friend's house and his dad brought home a bunch of jerky. It's very, very common to get free jerky if you work there. One was an interesting pack that had smallish jerky sticks, slightly smaller than a pen, on one side, and if I remember correctly, a cheese sauce on the other. It was for sure some sort of sauce. Anyways, it was super good, but I have never ever been able to find it in store and have never seen it since, and I want more. Story 17. There's a highway near here that has a busy intersection with a light that would always take forever to get through during busy hours. But in the direction going back into town, there was a third lane in between the right turn lane and the normal right lane that randomly began before the light, and then just merged back into the normal right lane after the intersection. For some reason, nobody ever used to use it, and my friends and I would always use it to skip several minutes of traffic when there was a red light there. You could drive all the way up to the front of the light, past a ton of cars, then just merge back in afterwards, and avoid getting stuck waiting for multiple red lights to finally get through. Eventually, more and more people caught on, and now that lane is just as backed up as all the others. I miss that secret third lane whenever I'm driving back into town now. Story 18. I worked for Cartoon Network very briefly in early 2009. I made a few props for Flapjack that were commissioned by show creator Therop Van Orman. While I was still working on the props, I was sent a video file for a TV show that was in the process of being greenlit for development by Mr. Caselby Van Orman. He asked me to watch it and let me know what I thought, since it was made by a friend of his. The clip was no more than 10 minutes and was hand-drawn animation with some parts still not colored in. After finishing the clip, I told him that I thought it was funny in a random type of way and it would be a show I would watch, since I was 14 and was into that type of humor. Turns out, I had watched a first draft pilot for Adventure Time. The show didn't come out until over a year later and pretty much replaced Flapjack too. Ooh. I found a clip was essentially what I saw, but not 100%. I wish my computer at that time didn't crash since I could have saved the file. Story 19. On the highway I take to and from work, there are 3 lanes, plus a 4th lane for left turns only at intersections. At an intersection, I would pull up to the furthest right lane, which everyone assumed was a right turn only lane but was actually not, and drive past everyone waiting for their lane to go forward. Now everyone takes advantage of this and takes it a step further. I now see cars cutting into the breakdown lane before there is even a 4th lane on the road. Just to drive around, everyone then cut off all 3 lanes of traffic to get back in the left lane. Story 20, I came up with the concept for the plot behind Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze more than a decade before the game came out. For English class back in 2003, we had to write a children's story that revolved around the concept of one group or race of characters invading another. Mine was about a bunch of animals that lived on a tropical island: parrots, monkeys, lizards, etc. And then one day a bunch of cold climate animals, polar bears, penguins, moose, etc., showed up and started terraforming the island to suit their needs by freezing it. The story to the game is practically identical, though there's no moose. Too bad I never published my own version anywhere, and don't have the project anymore either. It literally only exists in my mind as a memory now. Story 21. I knew that the company I worked for was going to close before it was announced. I worked for a regional company with about 15 locations. The decision was made that we were closing everything almost immediately. I was talking to a friend of mine whose brother-in-law was a district manager, and he told me what was up. The upper management was informed a few days before, and he found out then told me. He swore me to secrecy and I had to sit on the info for 2 days before the whole company was informed. It was horrible as I watched all my coworkers go about their lives not knowing what was about to happen. It's been over 10 years and it still bugs me sometimes. Story 22. Your communication is not safe. No, not even when it's end-to-end encrypted. You didn't make your app, you don't control what it does. End-to-end encryption only affects what happens between 2 devices. It does not affect what happens on your phone. If Apple, Telegram, Signal, whoever want to know what you've written or what someone else has written to you, all they have to do is push an app update. They might not even have to do that. The code might already have a switch programmed which they can flip and make it send all your communication home. You can choose to trust they won't do this, but they can do this. This is becoming public knowledge more and more, but it's still hard to get people to understand. You think the Facebook Messenger app doesn't phone home? Story 23, not really that impressive, but a guy I knew at high school had a fake boyfriend. This guy had just come out of the closet and told us about his amazing boyfriend. When our circle of friends tried to meet said boyfriend, something would always come up. The car broke down, got mugged, lots of weird excuses. My friends totally bought it, but I knew it was absolute BS and got called out for hating gays. Fast forward a couple of months, and the guy is posting photos of his boyfriend on Facebook. The pictures always look fishy AF, odd angles obscuring the face. I recognized one of the photos as a young male from an advertising campaign, did a reverse image search on the Facebook photo, and it took me to their website. I wrote on his profile that this photo was not legit. His friends were shocked that they had been baited so hard. He wrote nasty words and blocked me as soon as possible, and then posted a sob story about how everyone's out to get gays, and his boyfriend was working as a model for said campaign, and the images got mixed up. Story 24 wasn't exactly a secret, but I got to ride in one of those self-parking cars back in like 2006, 2007-ish. Believe it was a Lexus, but it might have been some other crazy expensive car. A friend of a friend's dad was the guy that tested new cars for most media outlets in Western Canada, so got a new high-end sports car every couple of weeks. This friend took them out to impress the ladies. It never once impressed the ladies, but it was fun riding around in something that was worth a hell of a lot more than I was back then. Story 25 knew just how badly Ryan Perlou was misbehaving before LSU kicked him off the football team. Drank with a bouncer that worked at another place where Perlou and his crew had a nice Donnybrook with all the bouncers. Football players got trounced. Also, I stopped by some office one time, and while waiting for my app, this student worker was talking to another student on the phone about could they just try to turn in the paper at some point soon, even though the semester was over? My curiosity was piqued and I looked at the screen. Dude had all sorts of notes on his profile about late, incomplete, or missing academic work. Between those two things and the stuff LSU was saying publicly about him, I knew he'd be gone. I was telling fellow LSU fans he'd be gone, but no one bought it. Story 26. Professional wrestling being fake used to be a very big secret in the 70s to 80s. Now it's all anyone ever says if you mention it. I'm more irritated with wrestling because it's about predetermined results than anything else. I understand the concept of two or groups of wrestlers using their athletic caliber to make a match intriguing and playing safe to not injure each other and themselves. But just knowing who's jobbing who's more likely to get the belts, just feels so artificial. It's why I believe that wins and losses don't mean crap in places like WWE. I don't see anyone caring about them as they would in other sports. Story 27, that British intelligence broke the Enigma code during World War II. Intense stuff, really. Or how about the non-concealed fact, but still mind-blowing fact, that the USA outsmarted Japan by knowing that they could hack into the USA's code, but also knowing that Japan did not know that the USA could hear theirs. The USA predicted that the code AF stood for Midway, and they said something along the lines of Midway to see if Japanese signals would communicate the same thing with AF. They were right, bark peep. Story 28. This is a story from one of my old high school teachers who led trips to DC. On one of the trips, they noticed men atop the White House with assault rifles. Someone took a picture, and a man in a black suit and sunglasses took the disposable camera and stomped on it. Strangely, it wasn't long after that a movie featured armed men atop the White House. I don't remember which movie the teacher mentioned, but I remember seeing it in Olympus Has Fallen. Story 29, the fact that the Enigma coding machine had been cracked. Following work performed by Polish codebreakers, the codebreakers at Bletchley Park were able to crack the German codes and were aware of pretty much everything the Germans were doing by the end of World War II. The Allies were rightly worried that if anyone knew that Enigma had been cracked, that the Germans would change their codes, so the Allies used a load of ridiculous methods to cover their tracks, like sending scouting planes over naval convoys that they already knew about from cracking the codes, just so there would be a reasonable excuse when the convoy was then attacked. Very few people knew that Ultra information actually came from them cracking the Enigma code though, and several countries continued to use Enigma machines for years after the war had ended. Story 30. Hang around the technical subs and you'll sometimes see questions the usual experts aren't willing to answer. It's not that they don't know how to do X, it's that they know it can't be done safely by the OP and are keeping their mouth shut. I recall a paintball gun related one. Something about a certain model of GoPro style camera is directly compatible with a certain model of electro gun that makes it motion triggered. Once they realized what the op wanted to do with it, they deleted the whole explanation and process. left it with, "I'm not helping you blind innocent children." Story 31. Silk production. For 3 millennia, the Chinese state held a near global monopoly on the production of silk. Most people outside China thought silk came from a plant rather than a worm. Attempting to export silkworms or their eggs was punishable by death in order to maintain the monopoly. Child production in China dates back to at least 3630 BC. But the secrets of silk production didn't leak out of the country until over 3,000 years later. As someone from Vietnam who knows local artisan businesses that make lotus silk, it's not really a dying art. The problem is that it takes literally 2 months for an artist to make even just a scarf, and we don't have fresh lotus stems available all year as raw materials. So you end up with a limited number of people who know how to do it, a limited amount of time to do it, before your raw materials rot, and not many people with FU money to actually purchase the final product. Yeah, it's expensive for obvious reasons. Story 32. This is going to sound crazy, but like the entry into the Blizzard server rooms. My professor in school worked for them for a hot minute, and he said that in order to get access to the room, you had to get another person with the same access level as you, and get on both sides of the doors and basically synchronize when you turn the keys in order to gain access. Of course, this makes sense when you see that there are well over 1 million people who have credit cards on record that play WoW, and also what my professor called modified C++ classes and libraries, which to me essentially means the bread and butter of what makes WoW. I know this isn't like atomic bombs or anything, but I find it interesting that they kept it so locked up inside their building. Story 33. I had a 9-5 Facebook scam job about 5 years ago where I was paid hourly to convince people to let me rent their Facebook page so we could run ads on it. I knew it was a scam, so I scammed the scammers and just set up a network of people to do everything that was required for my job and paid them referral bonuses. I then paid a bunch of people in the Philippines to do all the admin work. I did literally nothing and raked it in. Just took a call from my boss every so often for a few years for him to tell me how well I was doing. I played golf and sat on the beach and played video games for a few years until the boss died in a helicopter crash and Facebook caught on and lawyered up. All my coworkers wondered how I was doing so well. I just told them I worked super hard. In reality, I was just spending a small percentage of my income to have a bunch of people do my job for me on a larger scale. Story 34. After the Council of Nicaea, popular access to the Gospels was discouraged by the Church. This was to avoid the multifarious interpretations that marked the early centuries of Christianity. Heterodox opinions were branded heresies and suppressed. Then the Reformation happened, and the scriptures were printed in the vernacular. Surprisingly enough, multifarious interpretations of the Gospels immediately fractured European Christianity. I'm imagining Martin Luther in the afterlife seeing the spread of Latter-day Saints, Seventh-day Adventists, and Christian Scientists. This is hell, isn't it? Story 35. The fact that you don't learn ethical hacking standards or really how to hack until the upper levels of computer science. I know you could in a roundabout way learn how to do this very easily on the internet, but I think sometimes there are reasons that current hacking methods aren't readily available on the internet. Like if I look in my passwords cache in my iPhone, it says that most of them are compromised, but I've only ever had an account hacked 2 times. One was because I sold my Xbox as a teenager and didn't sign out of my profile. And one was some guy, I assume, bought my password in a Steam leak for my Steam account and signed into my Steam account from a country in South America, like Venezuela, or something I can't remember. It's really not good just to have a tutorial for easy ways to hack without an absolute reason to, like security checking for a company that is paying you to patch holes in their security.